Welcome back, everyone. You've chosen a really special day to join us on 33 Founders because I'm here with Nadine Hanafi, the founder of We Are Visual. Thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So Nadine, you've just released your new book, Slide Therapy. Can you give us an introduction into what readers can expect?
Yes, absolutely. So Slide Therapy is a very visual book where I basically give away everything I know about presentation design, all the knowledge I've amassed over the last 5 years since I started designing presentations in PowerPoint. So it basically teaches you a lot of the do's and don'ts of slide design and teaches you how to use the tool less as a linear kind of document generating tool, which is the way that most people use it, but more as a design tool, and everyone I talk to about this knows I'm a big proponent of PowerPoint, and I'm always telling people that it's as good as InDesign or Photoshop, and you can do a lot with it when you know how to use it right. And so in this book, I teach you basically how to use PowerPoint as you would InDesign or Photoshop to create really cool looking stuff that you wouldn't think you could do in PowerPoint. So that's the basic premise of Slide Therapy.
One of the things that I loved going through is, as I shared with you before, when someone even utters the word design, I just put my hands up and think, nope, I can't do it. But what I loved about Slide Therapy is, as I was reading, there's so much actionable, nearly every page is actionable. So you give me an example and then you tell me how to do it. You're not a designer by education or practice. This is something you're passionate about, and as you said, happened by accident. Can you tell us how that played into the book?
Absolutely. So yeah, as you mentioned, I'm not a designer by trade. I didn't go to design school, and I'm very open about the fact that I don't know how to use Photoshop. And yes, you're right. Design is very intimidating to a lot of people, including me. And so I really wrote the book that I would have wanted to read, a book that keeps things simple for me as a non-designer, that doesn't use all this technical lingo that I don't understand. So I wrote it from the perspective of a casual PowerPoint user, which I was for a long time, and wrote it for the casual PowerPoint user who doesn't have time to learn all the lingo and doesn't need to really to create great looking slides. You just need to know a couple tricks here and there. So yeah, so it's very much not intimidating, not technical, very simple.
There's so many moments too when you're reading the book where I just be like, oh, that's how they do it. Whether it was saying like fonts have a personality, there's a certain way you should space the letters. How did you break up the book to target each of those?
Well, what happened is Slide Therapy originally was a training program that I had on the website. And when I first started, it started with me just sharing my screen with my clients, right? So they would ask for some changes to be made on the PowerPoint, and I said, you know what, why don't I just share my screen with you and show you, and then you'll just tell me exactly what you want. And so I had these clients on the phone looking at my screen as I was making changes, and I would get all these, whoa, wait, what? How did you do that? and they're like, oh my God, I didn't realize you could do that so easily in PowerPoint. Or what you just did in 30 seconds would have taken me 3 hours to figure out. So I started picking up on all the, this feedback I was getting. And so I developed Slide Therapy as a training program originally, sharing my screen with people and showing them how to transform their slides. And so because I've done that so many times and interacted with people who are now my audience for the book, people who were casual PowerPoint users who wanted to improve their skills, I learned a lot about my target audience and my readers and what mistakes they make and what things they would want to learn. And so I incorporated a lot of what I've learned through that training into the book. Yeah, so that's how that kind of came about.
One of my favorite things also is how there's so many examples in the book where you have this works and this doesn't, and then there's the steps right under.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, I wrote the book I wanted to read. I wrote it for me. I'm a very lazy person. I hate to read. My favorite book. I mean, I read a lot now because I get a lot of value and I pick my books better. But honestly, through college and throughout my childhood, I hated reading. My favorite book is still my childhood book, Cinderella, which is like big pictures with like a little bit of text. That's my favorite kind of book to read to this day. Um, so I wrote the book I wanted to read. Again, just, images. I don't need to explain to you, take, 3 pages to explain something to you when I could just show you in 2 or 3 pictures what I'm trying to say. Save you time, save me the hassle, and we both win. So yeah, so the book is very visual. It's very, don't do this, do this. Don't do this, do this. Yeah.
There's a couple of things that I want to dive into that both amount in the book and just in your work and previous writings that you've had. One is that a presentation should have a tweetable. So an entire presentation should just have one line that can describe it. Can you dive into that a little deeper?
Yeah. So a lot of people, if you ask somebody who's giving a presentation, what's your presentation about? A lot of times they'll just give you like a 2 or 3 word answer, like, oh, it's about sea level rise in Florida. And I say, no, that's not, like, that should not be the title of your presentation, because that's not telling me what your presentation is really about or what it's trying to achieve. And you're not doing, yourself a favor by sharing that as a title. The better way to go, and what I recommend, is to kind of have like a headline, as a title, and a headline that's about the length of a tweet, so 140 characters, which kind of helps you limit it that way psychologically. You can't just go over and say everything that's within the presentation. And so like a good title for something like that would be, you would say my presentation is about, what the causes of sea level rise in Florida and what we can do as residents of, South Florida to, help with this or prevent it or whatnot. And so you're already kind of giving me a sneak peek, a preview of what you're going to talk about. And not only is that a better title, but it's also, it also makes it more enticing for your audience. They want to now hear more about it or want to attend your presentation. So that's the tweetable title.
I love that. When it comes to getting into the presentation, this is actually something that you tweeted a while ago, that studies have shown
no,
it's good. Studies have shown that our working memory has the capacity to retain 4 to 5 chunks of information. 3 to 4 is optimal. Something you shared just a moment ago about the book is that if I can show you in 2 or 3 pictures, I'm going to do that. I'm not going to tell you in 3 pages. How do you help your readers as well as your clients, we are visual, keep things not to a minimum, but to the right amount of information so you're not overwhelming me?
Yeah, it's a process. It's, the biggest part of the work that we do is not creative, it's destructive.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's
lot
a
of
tweetable in itself. That was a good one.
Thank you. And it's true, because before we even get to making your slides pretty or or making things look good, we got to cut out a lot of the fluff, a lot of and I feel like a lot of people put way too much content in their presentations just because it makes them feel more comfortable, or they feel like if they don't put enough, they'll look like they don't know that much about their stuff, to their audience. And so the biggest, part of the work that we do is sitting down with, the client and explaining to them that, okay, like, we need to narrow down your content. By doing that, we need to focus in and hone in on what is your goal, what is the goal of this presentation, what are you trying to get across exactly. You're not there to dump information on people and just hope that they remember something or that something comes out of it. You're going in there, you're a man with a plan or a woman with a plan, and you are trying to accomplish A and B, and that's it. And so we kind of use that as a funnel or a filter, and all of the content goes through that. So every slide goes through this filter, and if it doesn't pass the test, if it doesn't serve the purpose of A or B, then it's not staying, it's going. And so that kind of, and then we end up with just the essence of the message. And then from there we kind of go and and build on that and put that into a narrative form and all of that fun stuff. Complicated.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's something I've shared previously before, that as a presenter, I need to pre-digest the information, I need to analyze it, and I need to tell you, here's what it is, here's why it matters. Not like, let's try to correlate these variables.
Or it's like a lot of presenters go into the room, it's like, hey audience, why don't we both try to figure this out together and figure out what I'm trying to tell you here, because I'm not really sure and I didn't really think about it beforehand. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's the job, your job as a presenter to do that work for your audience. Otherwise, what's your purpose for even being there and presenting the information? Yeah, and I think because so many people take the word presentation so literally and they just go and present information, that gives those of us who do things differently the opportunity to kind of stand out, and be that person that doesn't just come in and present information and just lay a bunch of information on you and say, figure it out, but goes in and says, here is the important insight out of all this. I'm not going to bore you with all the details. Here's what you need to know. These are all the numbers that we have, but I'm not going to share all the numbers with you because there's only these 3 numbers that are very important that I want to talk to you about today, blah, 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 whatever it is. And audiences love that, especially if you're presenting to busy executives and people for whom time is money. They don't, they don't want to be bothered with the minute details. And when they come across somebody who comes to them with a presentation where the information is pre-digested and very focused, they really appreciate that, and you will leave a very good impression on that person, of somebody who's really prepared and who knows their stuff. So yeah, I think it's very important to pre-digest information for your audience and not just throw everything at them. And
something that really interested me in that element of your work was the simple difference of saying, so this is obviously not an impactful example, we can say 90% of people like chocolate cake, okay? Or you can have 10 figures, 9 of them filled out, 1 of them not, with a piece of cake and the statistic. I was mind blown at the difference that made in how I remembered it.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you mentioned that. That's one of my favorite examples from slide therapy. And it's definitely one of those things, because the book is full of tips that seem like they're small, but they make a big impact. So it's like these small changes that make a big impact. And this is one of them, is the way that you express a piece of data can make a world of difference in the way that it's received. So the example is, yes, you said 90%, but let's make it like one of those funky numbers. Like say it was 91.7%. So you say 91.7% of people love chocolate cake. Okay, I'll probably forget that number in 5 minutes, and it won't really mean anything to me because it's this very abstract number, and you can't really visualize what 0.7 of a person is. But then if you change it to 9 out of 10 people love chocolate, whatever we said that was, then all of a sudden it's 9 people. You can visualize 9 people. That's real. That's not abstract. That's not conceptual anymore. It's 9 people out of 10. So you picture 10 people, and 9 out of them love chocolate cake. You'll remember that. And if you add that visual to it with the 9 little figures, and then 9 out of them are filled in, then you remember that visual too, and that helps you remember the data. So yeah, so definitely small changes make a big impact.
Yeah, I was shocked by just the little people there. In my head, it's remained as the people example, but I can't wait to use that.
Yeah.
You discuss in the book a great deal about how to present data, and it goes along those lines of don't just throw the data out there, conceptualize it in a way I can remember this. And I love that you said that we need to avoid death by bullet points. Can you explain a couple of the ways in the book that individuals, especially startup companies, that's mainly who we talk to on the show, can present their information? I love the way that you demonstrate the charts also.
Yeah. So I talk about how the worse than death by bullet points is annihilation by charts. Because I really do think like bullet points, seeing them just gives me a headache. Seeing a bad chart is the worst thing. It's worse than bullet points. Why? Because oh, you got my engine running here. Because bullet points are just plain text. You've got one level of information coming at you. Charts are a multi-level piece of information. So there's multiple layers to it rather than levels. You got to read the axis, the y-axis, x-axis, the line or the whatever it is, and then try to interpret the information and then figure out what it means. It's a lot of information, and so when somebody puts up this, just kind of raw piece of data or chart up on a slide, you're not doing yourself a favor, you're not doing your audience a favor. It's going to take them forever to read it, to figure out what it's trying to tell them. Meanwhile, you're talking maybe about it, maybe about something else, but they're busy looking at it and trying to figure it out. So a lot of times charts is when audiences just go, like that's when you lose the audience, is when you start putting up these charts. So I dedicated a whole section of the book, a big chunk of the book, to data displays. I'm not sure what your question was exactly about this part, or what you would like me to highlight or share.
I'd love if you could highlight. So there's a couple examples in the book where it's like a line graph and you're demonstrating, 6 or 7 different companies who are working on the same thing. And then there's a difference between all of a sudden one of them being bigger, and I can totally see what the person is pitching me and like, wow, look how great your company is doing, versus the one where they're all together and I'm like, okay, this is a problem, I guess.
Yeah, like, okay, I think I get it. Yeah, so the idea there is similar to what we were talking about pre-digesting information. So my biggest advice, and the one thing that you can do to change your charts completely and make a huge difference, you don't have to do anything else. Just do this one thing, is use contrast in your slides, in your charts. So what I mean by that is, when, say you have a chart, everything on it, like all the numbers, all the labels, everything is the same size. All the lines are all the same thickness. There's a lot going on. When you use contrast, you de-emphasize the unimportant and you emphasize the important. And that visually just brings out the important information and helps your audience figure out what this is trying to tell them at a glance. So they look at it for 3 seconds, they already know. So the example that you're mentioning is, you have 5 or 6 lines. Fade out all the lines and just, color one line, the one that you're going to talk about, and make that prominent, and just like make all of the text, gray it out, whatever you have to do. Just everything kind of fades into the background, and you only bring out the most important piece of information that you're going to actually mention as you talk about the slide. If they don't need to see everything else, then you don't need to have it there. So using contrast to fade out, de-emphasize the unimportant, and emphasize the important. I think that's the biggest thing that you can do for your charts. That will transform them completely.
When it comes to, so as you were just alluding, that we want to show our audience what they need to know, not the 10 other notes that led me to get to this point. And something you've said previously that really stuck with me is that a presentation should feel like it was designed for your audience. So when I'm listening to you present, I should think, wow, like, was this custom for me? Can you elaborate on the importance of that?
It's so important. The best thing that you can achieve as a presenter that will make your presentation successful is if your audience feels like you got inside their head and you're talking to them, and they like the best thing that I get when I'm presenting that I love is when I'm talking to people and I get those nodding heads, those totally, or you're right, or how did you know, like those kinds of, like, you customized your presentation so much, and you understood your audience so well that you got that reaction from them. That's a good thing. And so when you are able to get those nodding heads and get inside your audience's head, you're much more likely to inform them, educate them, persuade them, whatever it is that you're trying to do. You're inside their head. And not only that, but they like you now because you understand them. And it's that concept of reciprocity. which is a powerful persuasive
Very
technique,
true.
right? So, when somebody feels like you made an extra effort to understand them and customize something for them, then they want to give you their attention and they want to listen to you, and they'll want to say yes to whatever you're going to pitch them, So I think that's super important, and that's goes back to knowing your audience, filtering, selecting your information, not dumping everything on them, but going in and finding the few pieces of content that you have that are going to make the biggest impact on that specific audience, and then adapting also your call to action, your introduction and your final call to action to your specific audience. Right? That's all very important.
And I want to highlight in that sense that, for example, if you're a founder pitching investors, you may have to change that single presentation for each investor.
Oh, absolutely, and you should. And you should. Yeah, I can't stress that enough. I share this with a lot of startups that I've worked with who are pitching investors, and I say, okay, we're creating your presentation, one version of it as far as your slides are concerned. But the way that you pitch it and the things you emphasize or don't emphasize will depend on who you're speaking to. And actually, you may change your presentation completely. If it's a big investor, it's a really high stakes situation. You want to find out who those 2 or 3 people are who are in the room and do some background checks on them. What do they like to do? What do they not like to do? What were the last few companies they invested in? Who were the last few companies that pitched to them that they said no to? All these details that may seem, small, but they're big. And so go and find every piece of information you can about them. What's their favorite book? Maybe there's something about maybe that's also your favorite book and you can mention it. Boom, likability factor, working for you. There's so many ways that you can improve your presentation just by getting to know your audience, really well on that level. And so for a startup that's pitching an investor, yeah, I mean, they hear so many pitches all the time that if you are that one person that comes in and does something differently and researches them, I think those are good points.
It lends to how you get people to take action. And you had a great insight in time, I think back in June, where you're saying that, if you want someone to take action, there's 2 ways that you could do it. First way is you can give me a statistic. I'm not going to be moved by a statistic, but you go in depth in that article and say, if I tell you a story that leads up to that statistic and say there's 75% of people who are like X person, I'm not only going to be called to help, but I'm going to go text my best friend and say, hey, there's a great initiative. Can you get involved? Can you tell us about the importance of that visual story?
Yeah, absolutely. So I believe the statistic that I was talking about in that article was something about the number of people who don't have access to clean water in the world, right? And this applies to really anything. Statistics are these faceless, nameless, abstract things, but they actually represent real things. And so what I advise people to do when it comes to statistics and making them more persuasive and more memorable is to kind of like bring out the humanity out of the statistic or the whatever it is, make it real and don't let it remain this abstract thing, for 2 reasons. One is data that's not that is visualized in an abstract way or that is just shared in terms of numbers without anything else. Those types of that type of data is not remembered well by people. Like, they'll take it in and then it'll go away. Also, it's less persuasive than data that comes with images. And then images also add that emotional layer to the statistic, and emotions are super important as far as persuasion is concerned. So if you want to persuade somebody of the importance of this number, you got to tie it into an emotion. They have to feel something about that number. So if you say to me that 900 million people don't have access to clean water, okay, that's sad, you know. But then you tell me the story about this little boy whose name is, John, who lives in X village. His mother walks 3 hours every day to get them clean water. He's never actually had clean water in his life. He's 5 years old. And you just give me all these vivid, real details about this person. And just tell me the story of this little boy and his mother who, now is in the hospital and can't, whatever it is. And so you take me on a journey with you, and then at the end you're like, well, there's 900 million other people like John, and all of a sudden it's like, whoa, that's a problem.
I love how you said that, because actually, as you were just remarking slightly on that story, I remembered in that, and this is like 3 paragraphs in time, I remembered that the little boy you were talking about goes to the lake or goes to get clean water, and sometimes there's none left, so he goes to drink from a puddle.
Right.
And so that just totally proves your point, because had I read that statistic this weekend, I would have been very sad, but I haven't been able to forget that sometimes he goes to get the water and there's nothing there, so he drinks from a puddle. Wow. You're working your magic on me.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's kind of just like, what do they call it? The movie Inception. It's like planting a seed in somebody's mind, and that seed is there. You can't, it won't go away. And that's the power of a story, I think. Is once it's kind of like a mental, that emotion that you felt when you read that story is like a mental save button. It just kind of sears that number and that information into your brain, and now it's there to stay, because you'll be able to reconstruct that information and recall it from remembering that emotion and that story. So yeah,
it lends right into a great post that you had a little while back.
Done your research.
It was on LinkedIn. It was very helpful, but it was about the difference between a presentation and delivery. So you say that content has to be great. That's a prerequisite. But the way you deliver is what's going to make me remember. And you cite Amy's TED Talk, where there are some personal things that you've done. I've done them also. I remember doing it in the bathroom, where I stood up in college to try before my presentation, to kind of gear yourself up to make that kind of presentation. Can you give us some insight into that?
Yeah, Amy Cuddy.
Amy Cuddy.
Yeah, the power poses. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that TED Talk. I watched it so many times, and I recommend it to anybody who wants to learn about this technique, because it really does work, and it's awesome. And I use it personally, as you mentioned. I don't know what it is, but I can share. To be honest, delivery is something that I know fairly well from my personal experience, having gone from somebody who really sucked at giving a presentation and I getting up in front of people and talking, to somebody who's fairly good at it now. And what I've learned is what I share and what I teach is what I've learned from my experience transitioning from that not so good speaker to the good speaker that I am now. And what I've found is that there's 2 things that change everything, which is knowing your stuff, like inside and out.
Predigest people.
Yeah, which is another reason why you need to predigest, because like the other side of it is, not only are you making it easier for your audience, but you're making it easier for yourself to remember everything you want to say. Just say less. Keep it simple for yourself. Keep it simple for your audience. So knowing your stuff, there's no substitute for that. You've got to know your stuff. And then the other thing is this elusive thing called confidence. And some people think, oh, I'm not confident, or whatever it is, I'm shy. I'm shy too. I mean, I may seem sometimes like a bubbly, social person, but I can be an introvert, and I can be shy. And so it's not about being shy. It's not about having lack of confidence. It's about faking confidence. And so that's what Amy Cuddy talks about. So you can be this like kind of shy person in your everyday life, and you don't have to change anything about that. That's who you are. But when you're about to go speak, you kind of put on a mask. Like, I'm going to use this this example, and some people may like it, some people may not. But you know, Beyonce, she has this alter ego. I think
Sasha
it's
Fierce.
Sasha
Sasha
Fierce.
Fierce.
And Sasha Fierce is like, you know, and so it's funny because I remember watching interviews of Beyonce like 10, 15 years ago when she first started out, and she was this kind of like shy, very, very polite, very calm girl. And then on stage, it's like a whole other person. She just turns into this like super fierce girl, and she's, you know, her dance moves, and it's like, you know, and then she's like good Christian girl, and then she's like crazy girl on stage. So, and I think that's a kind of a genius way to separate. You know, it's, you know, she fakes that confidence on stage because she doesn't have it in real life. She's not one of those like, you know, sassy ladies in real life, but she is on stage. So power poses kind of do that, give you that same effect. And that's my take on Amy Cuddy's power poses is you fake that confidence, you're going on stage, you're putting your stage face on. Yeah, and you're delivering it with that persona, with that presence, with that, but you're faking it all. And the thing about faking it is you fake it until you make it, and you fake it until it becomes real. And if you fake it enough times, it starts becoming natural. And for me, that's how it happened. Is the first time I went on stage, I faked it, you know, faked confidence. And then the second time, I felt like I had to fake it less because it was there. And the third time, I was just confident, and I didn't have to fake it anymore. So yeah, and then delivery is absolutely important. How confidently you deliver a message will make or break your presentation. You can have the best slides, the best content, everything is perfect, but then you deliver it, you know, without conviction, without passion, without, you know, just without that fire, and it will tank. You know, it won't make that, you know, it won't have that effect. I think passion is everything. Just having that passion when you go up on stage, and because you got to light people up on fire, you know, like you got to get them excited. That's your job as a presenter.
I love that you said that, because if you can't do that, they're not. If I'm not leaving excited about you, I'm not going to do what you want me to do.
Yeah. You want your audience to kind of leave on that high, you know, of just having listened to this super energetic presence that was in the room. And they're not going to get excited for you by themselves. You're not going to walk into a room and everyone's like, oh my God, I can't wait to hear it. Everyone's kind of just sitting there, okay, let's see what you've got to say. And it's your job to rev their engines.
I want to transition from that into your journey building We Are Visual, because as you said that, you know, the first time you gave a presentation, it was a slow culmination of that confidence, and now you have it. You've met the 10,000 hour mark for presentations, and like you said, you don't think it makes you an expert, just a presentation nerd, but it's working.
Yeah.
When it comes to We Are Visual, you just celebrated your second birthday. What are you most proud of?
Honestly, I don't feel like have yet accomplished you know, what I want to accomplish with We Are Visual, to really be proud of myself. You know, I know my family's proud of me. I know, you know, my friends are proud of me. My people who support me are proud of me, and they look up to me, and I get these amazing messages that make all the suffering worth it, which is like young, you know, entrepreneurs or wannabe entrepreneurs who are thinking about starting their businesses, and, you know, and they read about my story and they're inspired to make the jump. Getting those messages lights my fire, and that makes me proud of myself. But really, I don't feel like I have yet. You know, I think after, if slide therapy does well and I'm able to impact a larger audience and help a larger audience with what I know, you know, I think I'll feel really proud of myself at that point. That's my goal.
I'm glad that you mentioned that there's a part of startups. So there's a part of We Are Visual on the outside. It's great. You have great clients, business is successful, but it's really hard to be a founder. And a lot of times we don't talk about that. No. Fred Wilson just shared a great insight that there are some things that we have to learn the really, really hard way to learn them well. What's a lesson that you've learned the last 2 years as a founder that just shapes how you do your work today?
Oh my God, there's so many. Um, I'm not going to get deep, so I'm not going to go into the bigger life lessons, but one that's kind of a practical lesson that I guess people would, benefit from maybe is I I've always been one of those people that gets very overwhelmed by a to-do list.
Mm.
So it's like, I make my to-do list and this massive thing, and I'm like, oh my God, I can't do all of this by myself. And then I panic, and then I go on Facebook, or I go eat a burger. I gained so much weight in my first year in business because of just anxiety eating from my to-do list. And so one thing I've learned that's really helped me is I call it the horizontal to-do list. So I stopped looking at my to-do list as like this one big thing of things I have to do and check off. And I turned it, not upside down, but sideways, into a timeline. And I started looking at my to-do list as a timeline, you know what I mean? And kind of like those, what are they called? The Gantt charts.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like that. And so it's like phase 1 and then phase 2. And then I break everything into phases. And that also helps with my anxiety about the future, because I always want to do everything now, even though I don't really need to do it now, just because I'm so nervous about what's going to happen. When I break things down into phases and dates and assign dates to everything, it's just like, it brings me so much peace, relief that I have a plan. So I think it sounds like something new or different, but it's really not. It's just like your typical dreams or what is it? Goals without a plan, or just dreams or something like that. Yeah. So it's my to-do list is like this linear or horizontal timeline now, and it gives me this plan that I'm following, and it gives me that peace of mind of knowing that I'm following a plan and I'm going to get there. So that helps.
When it comes to the deep lessons, is there one that's been just instrumental and changed your perspective?
Yeah, my father will be happy to hear this. I've learned to take other people's, or ask for other people's opinions on things, which my dad thinks I should do more. But
Me too.
but with a twist, because what I realize is when you don't know, when you have no idea what you're doing, and you ask someone for direction, or you ask multiple people for direction, or you're going to get all sorts of answers, and none of them are going to take you where you want to go, because you don't know where you want to go. And so you just kind of go all over the place, and that's very dangerous. And so when I don't know at all what the hell I'm doing, I don't ask for opinion. I do my research first. Once I've narrowed it down to like an A or B situation, I could go this way or I could go this way, then I go and find qualified people, who have been there, or and that changed everything for me, because I felt like my business went, and I mentioned this to you earlier before we started the interview, is I started building this as a creative agency because I listened to well-intentioned people who gave me advice on how to build this traditional kind of business model of the creative agency with projects and designers, etc. And then I realized that that's not really what I wanted, the lifestyle that I wanted. I don't want to manage, tons of people, and I don't want to manage all these projects, and it's not scalable, and just, it's just not the direction I wanted to go. And so I was going kind of in the wrong direction for a while, because I listened to somebody who was well-intentioned, but really didn't know what I wanted, and I didn't know what I wanted either. So I think that's a big thing. I got lost for a while because I listened to the wrong people, or I didn't listen at all.
No, that's a great one, and I think it just lends to, I'm glad you highlighted that if you don't know what you want to do, they're not going to know.
They're not going to know. Yeah, and you can't expect people to figure it out for you.
It's not mind readers.
Yeah, and it's not their job. Yeah.
All right, last question. You shared that presentations should have a tweetable. So what do you want your tweetable to be? Whether it's personal, professional?
My tweetable as in like my personal.
Just about personal, Nadine. Doesn't even have to do with work.
Oh God, that's hard. You realize I'm the founder of a startup. My life is my work. I don't have a life.
It can be about We Are Visual too. You can include, hey, you've got 140 characters. You can include whatever you want.
Right. Well, you know what? I'll tell you what it is. My tweetable would be what I kind of recently changed to my Instagram profile to say this. It's Moroccan heart, American hustle, dream big, start small.
That's a good one. I have to say, I wasn't sure that you were going to have such a fast answer to that. That was impressive.
Yay!
So,
Thanks.
Before we go, thank you so much for being with me, for going into depth on so many of these topics. How can everyone get involved with what you're doing, get slide therapy, and really start learning about your work and the upcoming work that you guys are going to be doing?
Sure. So the website is wearevisual.com. And the way to get the biggest value from me is to either read the blog posts that are on the website, or download the free ebook that is also on the website, or get slide therapy, which is, you know, my life's work and what we talked about in the interview, everything I know about presentation design. You can also follow me on LinkedIn, which is also where I share blog posts and tips and stuff. So yeah, those are the places where you can get the best value and learn the most about presentation design.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.